What's up, comic and pop culture fans? Today we're looking at the illustrious, critically acclaimed Legends of the Dark Knight comic book run that ran from 1989 to 2007. Intended as a sort of companion series to fill in gaps in early Batman canon, this series ended up smashing expectations on account of its devotion to providing quality Batman story after story. What made this run so special is that it wasn't constricted to one set writing team. In fact, the series as a whole was a continuation of Batman stories, each done by writers ranging from Grant Morrison to Archie Goodwin to Dwayne Mcduffie to many more. The goal of the run was to provide one-time stories, each handled by a specific power team of famous writers and artists, set in the early days of Batman canon, ranging from what's considered Year 1, aka the first years on the streets as Batman, to around Year 3. It's a wonderfully welcomed addition to the Batman canon, as it allowed artistic freedom, and my favorite reason, filled in a lot of questions and canon explanations for a lot of early year set Batman canon. More than a few times the quality of this run passed that of the regular Batman and Detective Comics run. So today, we're going to look at a selection of Legends of the Dark Knight stories that I think embody some of the best Batman stories that are a must-read for any Batman fanatic. Let's start it off with a story called Siege, issues 132 through 136. One of the legendary writer/editor Archie Goodwin's last stories, and a wonderful tale of family and legacy. Siege finds Batman operating out of his downtown penthouse and has no interest in returning to his family home. When Wayne Manor is threatened by a man with a grudge against Bruce's grandfather, Bruce is forced to make a choice: save the Wayne legacy or let it burn. Goodwin and Rogers, along with James Robinson, who finished the story after Goodwin's passing, model an odd narrative about corruption, scandal, revenge, family, and most of all, self-transition. You won't find this in any collected editions, so you'll need to actually pick up the issues if you want to read them. Up next, we have a more popular, well-known one by Matt Wagner. This was Faces, issues 28 through 30. Batman must prevent TwoFace from creating an army of deformed, super-powerful slaves. When District Attorney Harvey Dent's face was forever deformed by a vial of acid, his mind was also fractured, and the maniacal TwoFace was born. Taking over a small Caribbean island and forcing plastic surgeons to perform unholy operations, TwoFace begins to create an army in his own image. The art is not for everyone in this, but the story, although at times cliché and tropey on paper, lands as a pretty surprisingly solid Batman story worth the repeated reads, and a definitive Two-Face story to boot. You can find this on eBay and Amazon in trade paperback form. Up next, another great one, Loyalties, issues 159 through 161. This delves into Jim Gordon's personal life and finally explores his pre-Gotham years out in Chicago. It's a messy affair including the mob, kidnapping, and Gordon's own family drama. Set right around the time the highly acclaimed Gotham Central came out, it was a rewarding year for the expansion of the Batman mythos by incorporating even more canon knowledge of the police force. Focusing more on the Gordon family and the drama within, this should be a go-to comic for understanding the complex character of Jim Gordon. You won't find this in any collected editions, so you'll need to actually pick up the issues if you want to read them. Up next, we have Hot House, issues 42 and 43 by John Francis Moore and Craig Russell. Pamela Isley, known as Poison Ivy, is out of the asylum after her first encounter with Batman, but when one of her colleagues dies under mysterious circumstances, her rehabilitation is called into question. With Ivy being the main focus, the creative team really got to expand on her backstory. We got a recap of her origin story, but as Batman dives deeper into the investigation, we find out a little bit more about her background and even her personality. We see the impact she had on people in her younger years and the slow descent into madness that resulted. It gives some much more needed depth to the character and adds to her past. A definitive Poison Ivy story, DC finally got wise and decided to include this in several collected editions. First, in Batman Collected Legends of the Dark Knight, which has long been out of print, although more recently in the Arkham Villain series, Poison Ivy. Most Poison Ivy fans missed this one, don't be one of them. Up next, we have a short story called Blades from issues 32 through 34 by James Robinson and artist Tim Sale. Yes, Tim Sale, the same guy who did the art for Long Halloween. This is actually his first work on Batman. While Batman is concerned with Mr. Lyme, a serial killer who targets the elderly, a new costumed Avenger shows up in Gotham, a swashbuckler hero type who calls himself the Cavalier. Gotham quickly embraces the new vigilante, who reminds Batman of his childhood idols, aka Zorro, and provides an image of the type of hero he might have become. But as most Batman stories go, the Cavalier is not what he seems. When Gotham's new hero is unable to meet the demands of this life, the inevitable confrontation comes to pass. In jaw-dropping Tim Sale artwork. Love or hate his artwork, this is an important stepping stone for Tim Sale within the world of Batman. This is collected in The Art of Tim Sale and the Tim Sale Batman Omnibus. Up next, we have issues 39 and 40, written and drawn by Brian Talbot. We have Mask. This feels like an episode from the animated series. A significant chunk of this is Bruce Wayne in a hospital bed with a therapist telling him he's an alcoholic and has some kind of split personality. It's clear it's a dream or some kind of hallucination. It's a great book for deciding what is real and what is not. There's a real sense of drama here, even though you know it can't be real. It certainly has an element of mystery, as you're not sure how it's going on, how this situation came to be, or how Bruce is even going to get out of this. It's something that you see in a lot of detective stories. How do they get out of this? But this one is where I think it succeeds. Up next, we got a short story from Dwayne Mcduffie, you know, the guy who created Static. This is Blink, issues 156 through 158. It's a cool detective story in which we're introduced to some new characters that I wish would be around more. A blind guy named Lee Hyland can see through the eyes of anyone he touches. It's a superpower of sorts that enables him to be an identity thief. This all sounds eerily similar to the plot of Unbreakable. Jim Gordon and Batman get involved after Hyland stops a murder and winds up as the suspect. A very different Batman story that actually did have a sequel. This is collected in the trade paperback, Blink. Next up is a story called Faith, which is issues 21 through 23 by Mike Barr, Bart Sears, and Randy Elliott. It's a story of a former drug dealer, John Ackers, who's saved by Batman. Ackers is inspired to start an organization that helps people in Batman's name, known as the Batmen. Ackers' intentions are misguided and under false assumptions. He sees Batman as a religious figure calling on him to kill a drug dealer. This story focuses on the relationship between Leslie Tompkins and Bruce Wayne as well. It details a little of their background and Leslie's beliefs in pacifism. The story depicts Leslie learning Batman's secret identity after he is shot in the back by Ackers. It also sets up the mindset that makes Batman ready to finally adopt a sidekick, making it an important part of the Batman canon. Mike Barr delivers a hard-edged story about poverty, responsibility, and belief, and although it is not collected in any trade paperback form, it's a worthwhile, quick 3 issues to pick up. Up next, we have a story that came at the very end of the Legends of the Dark Knight run. This was Blaze of Glory, issues 197 through 199, written by Will Pfeiffer and drawn by Chris Weston. What happens when you have a villain that's not afraid of death? This is an interesting story of a fairly ordinary criminal who has only a short time left to live, so he decides to go out in a blaze of glory. It's always fun to see a non-named Batman villain outsmart Batman. It's a great premise that's devoid of any A-list rogues like Joker, TwoFace, Killer Croc. If you're looking for a great one-time Batman story with a villain that does not resurface again, this might be one of the best reads for you. And it's pretty cool to see this no-name character get a little bit farther than all the other Batman villains. This may be a worthwhile read simply for the art alone. While not collected, you can pick up the single issues. Up next, we have Prey, issues 11 through 15 by Doug Mensch, Paul Gulacy, Terry Austin, and Steve Oliff. A story set in the very early days of Batman's career, just actually after year 1. Batman is still hated and feared by the police. The mayor of Gotham enlists brilliant psychologist Dr. Hugo Strange to provide some insight into Batman's personality. Obsessed, Strange transforms himself into a twisted mockery of the Dark Knight and discovers Bruce's true identity. When we think of Batman's greatest foes, sometimes Hugo Strange gets forgotten, but Mensch and Gulacy make a compelling argument for its greatness in this action-packed psychological thriller. The sequel to this story came out almost a decade later in issues 137 through 141, entitled Batman Terror, in which Hugo Strange returns, this time teamed up with Scarecrow. If you're willing to spend some money, you can get the collected edition of this in trade paperback, which does also include Batman Terror. Up next we have Venom, issues 16 through 20, written by Dennis O'Neil. Good old Denny. Anybody heard of the villain Bane? You know that stuff he pumps into his blood isn't just Fanta, it's Venom, a super soldier-like serum that Batman actually had a run-in with first, prior to Bane. Dennis O'Neil has contributed several enduring stories to the Batman legacy, but Venom's one of the best. When Batman's unable to save a little girl's life simply because he isn't Superman, he isn't strong enough, he turns to the strength-enhancing drug Venom and slides headfirst into a tailspin of addiction. Taut and emotional, Venom pushes Batman to the brink of insanity and brings him back just in time to fight, yes, a shark. Plagued a little bit by a silly ending, this story, at least for the most part, is an epic story that plays part to the Bane chronological. An important early 90s read, and some nice needed backstory on Bane. This story covers those heavy-hitting questions of, what do you do when you're just not strong enough? Plus, it's pretty interesting to see Batman lost to addiction. Winding down here, we got Gothic, issues 6 through 10 by Grant Morrison and Klaus Janson. The elite members of organized crime in Gotham City are terrorized by a serial killer named Mr. Whisper, who they believe to have murdered many years ago. Batman initially denies their call for help until he learns of the mystery behind the serial killer that was linked to his early childhood as a boy even before his parents were murdered. Tormented by a headmaster lacking in a shadow, Bruce Wayne many years later makes the connection and learns of the shadowless man's intentions. Grant Morrison returns to the darkness, as did his Arkham Asylum graphic novel had done before, as it dives into the darkness of the past. A crazy story tormented with dark imagery and deep meaning, and the actual devil as a character? Gotham will be remembered for years, and is even on IGN's list of top 25 Batman graphic novels you have to read. This has been collected many times and seems to get a reprint every 3 to 4 years. Last but certainly not least, we have Batman Going Sane, issues 65 through 68. And this is one that was actually submitted in the 80s, but it was rejected because it was too similar, allegedly, to Killing Joke. I don't necessarily agree. I think both are great books, but very different. When the Joker traps Batman in an explosion, he believes that he's finally rid of his nemesis. As a result, his insane mind returns to sanity, and the Ace of Knaves forgets his bloodstained past, starting a new life as the average citizen, Joseph Kerr. Batman, however, is still alive, and his return to Gotham means the end of the Joker's newfound happiness. I've always found the best Joker stories insinuate that he needs Batman, so with Batman gone, it's not a skip and a hop to think that he would go sane, and it makes it all much more tragic when Batman's return forces him back into the world of chaos. This is collected in the trade paperback Going Sane. I hope this video has given you some great Batman reads for the upcoming weeks. Let me know what you're picking up in the comments. Did I miss out on any stories? I know I didn't include Snow, I didn't include Terminus. Let me know in the comments which was your favorites. And as always, keep on collecting.